get that started. And so what we're going to do today is Dotsie and I will have a bit of a back and forth, and then we're going to open it up to what I'm sure will be a robust discussion. And so
Cool.
to kick us off, Dotsie, first of all, just talk a bit about what led you to become plant-based and dairy-free as you were pursuing your career as an elite athlete in track pursuit cycling, if I said it right.
Yes, definitely. You're doing good. You say it different every time, but it's all right,
Yeah,
actually.
it's on a
We're
track.
doing
You're in a
words.
team and you're
Yep.
pursuing some,
And
unless,
you're pursuing the other team. You got
right.
it. Um, well, I very quickly after I went entirely plant-based, learned about all of the benefits because I was experiencing them. But I went 100% vegan almost overnight because I just had the only thing I can describe it is a complete soul shift. I grew up loving and being around a variety of species of animals, and they were my safe space and my solace. And as I was, charting through middle school and high school, I didn't really ever think for one single second that those all of those same animals that I loved and spent so much time with were also the animals that were on my plate. And growing up in Kentucky, there was always an animal on my plate at every single meal. And so it took 35 years, which is a little long in my opinion. I wish it had done it a lot earlier, but I just I started I started diving down the internet rabbit hole, but also uh, speaking to folks, some athletes and some not non-athletes, trying to understand what goes on behind closed doors in our food system. Because I was just kind of it was really dense of me, but I think I thought, um, you know, since animals are losing their lives to feed people, they must treat them with the utmost respect and care. And I found that to not be the case at all. And then I learned it doesn't matter if you massage them before you shoot them in the head. You're still shooting them in the head. And these are all animals that don't want to die. They want to live like we do. So I just went cold tofurkey and never looked back.
Well, what's interesting is out of all of it, which is all interesting, but you said at 35, right? And you were a late bloomer in the competitive uh, cycling, track cycling space. And yet at 35, you make this change. And some might say, oh, that's risky. But instead, you ended up on the podium in London after that. So how does that happen? And what do you think this switch for you was a switch for good?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Lou, I mean, I was fed all the same lies that we've all been fed since childhood. Mostly pumped and distributed by the meat and dairy industry. So I remember thinking very early on, praying to the God that I don't really believe in, please, please let me just stay the same. I wasn't expecting any kind of boost or enhancement at all going plant based. I just, as I mentioned, the why behind why I did it was certainly not for athletic performance or any kind of boost because I hadn't heard anyone speak about that it could be an athletic performance boost. I just was like, please let me stay the same strength, let me stay the same endurance, let me stay the same recovery, just let me stay the same. And what I was absolutely totally shocked and surprised by was I got stronger, I got better, I got fitter, I had more energy, my rest was better, my immune system improved. I was really struggling with getting sick too often. My mood was enhanced, and everybody on here that trains to the degree that you have to train to go to an Olympic Games, which for us and most sports is 3 times a day. I was grumpy most of the time. I
Hmm.
just felt low and bloated and inflamed and just yucky. And so it was really cool to um, feel that shift in my mood. It's like my spirits just started soaring. It was, I think it was something, part of it was metabolic, but it was just definitely something that I didn't expect really any of it. But that part was pretty cool.
And so that was something around maybe 2007, 2008 when you made the switch. Um, around that,
Um, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
2000,
And
I think it was 2009-ish. Yeah.
yeah. And so what was the reaction if you started telling people that you were doing this in your team, in your sport,
Yeah.
what was the reaction?
Um, Back then it was people didn't really know very much. I wasn't calling it anything specific. I knew a fair amount about nutrition already, as you do as an athlete, right? You read the studies and you dive in, and I definitely had a few nutritionists in my career that helped to guide me. And so I really just was focusing on, I was already eating. I was, highly aware that fruits and vegetables and nutrient dense foods were good for me. Nobody believed the opposite of that at the time. And so I just started moving my plate around where the meat was coming off and the plant-based proteins were coming in. But I was still eating the rainbow in every other aspect of what was on my plate. So, and I didn't announce it at all. It was just, I was just doing this. And as you mentioned, I was a little bit more of a mature athlete, standing on the podium at almost 40. And so I didn't have I wasn't, 17 where it was like I was, highly controlled, living at the training center. I wasn't living there. I'd go in for camps, um, and I had a team that trusted me. I had coaches that trusted me. I had mechanics that trusted me. I had teammates that trusted me, and I trusted them. So it wasn't a thing. It just really wasn't. It was lovely, and they saw the improvement. It was kind of really, this is really interesting. I had a very close teammate who won the silver medal alongside, and she had horrible bloat and inflammation after almost every meal for years. She went to 3 Olympics. She started at 16, and she it was she was really struggling as the years were going along and as she was aging. And I finally said, go get tested. Like, you need some, I don't know where you're going to go get some tests. This is not normal and you need to feel better. So long story short, she comes back and it comes the tests come back that she has a gluten sensitivity and a full-blown dairy allergy. What does she take out? The gluten, because we had been so it just there was such a huge amount of weight on our shoulders from the nutritionist in the training center, who had been fed the lie by the dairy industries, RDs, and all their spinning of their crap science, that we needed this one specific fluid from this bovine species to be champions. And it was fed into her for so long, right? As she started at 16. So she was scared to take it out before the Olympics. So we get off that podium. She removes it the next day, has never turned back, and never felt better. So
Wow.
that's quite a
That's
story, and keeps it away from her children and
that's
etc.
that's powerful indeed. So that was 2012. You guys win silver. Uh, and so now let's fast forward to another Olympics, not one that you're in, however. This is one you're watching on TV, and this is the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, uh, South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And something happens that lights a fire under you, and you can pick up the story from there.
Yeah, well, by this point, I know the truth, and I'm charting a course as an activist. And there were a lot more athletes by this point who, had been sold the lie and dug for the truth and had dropped dairy from their diet, and some of them other animals as well. And so we just I try to make this shorter than longer because it can be a really long story. But I was just watching the Olympic trials for the 2018 Olympic Games, and a dairy industry commercial came on that was very frustrating to watch because it used a mother and her daughter in their relationship to sell cow's milk. And then those of us in this for animal rights know how thick and twisted that is. Um, so I just had something snap inside of me where I just thought, somebody has got to tell the truth. Somebody has to stand up. I mean, this is crazy. We're just going to keep listening to this, and we're just going to bow down and, let the industry keep feeding us these lies. And so I just got some Olympians together. There were 7 of us from, I think, 4 different sports, uh, multi-time Olympic medalists who were also feeling like they wanted to stand up and say something. So we decided to see if we could get some money and if we could make an ad and put a 30-second ad on that very Olympics closing ceremony. So at this point, we only have about 6 or 7 weeks until the closing ceremonies because I'm watching Olympic trials. So we did it. It was a great ad, and we paid for it to run in 6 cities. And the closing ceremony starts. The ad airs once in DC, which I am not aware of because I'm in Los Angeles waiting for it to air at 7:53:30, because not that I knew exactly what it was going to air or anything. And it doesn't air. And long story short is the dairy industry called NBC the second they saw the first spot and got it kicked off. And it's just the power of the dollar. And that was the spark. I think I always feel if there's any reason I'd be grateful to the dairy industry, it was that, because that just this rage began in me that no, this is not how this is going to go down. This is not how this is going to end. And so, yeah, Switch for Good was born, which was actually just the tagline at the end of the commercial, because we made this great commercial. And then 3 days before we had to send it to NBC, one of the producers is like, we have to say something at the end. Like, what do we tell people to do? And we're like, switch for good, make the switch for good. It was like one of them thought of it. So anyway, we kept the name.
That's and you know the kind of coda to the story is that yes, it only ran once in Washington, D.C., but because of that one running, it
Yeah.
kind of because it was kind of subversive in a way, um, it was it was it became there was a virality to it. It went viral, and that
Mm-hmm.
helped give Switch for Good kind of a good boost on it on its launch. So
Yeah, that's true. Like it went millions on the internet, and that's probably why, to your point, because they found out, oh, what do we want to watch? What got kicked off? Yeah, good point.
and so then uh, that's 2018. Switch for Good launches as a movement uh, to to show athletes that being dairy free is not going to hurt your performance and it can in fact help your performance. Correct?
It definitely can help. Yes.
And then in 2019, you were in the movie The Game Changers, which is about plant-based uh, uh, athletes who go plant-based and
Hmm.
who have who have athletic performance improvements. And so so fast forwarding, between then and now, uh, what is the organization? What are kind of where is your organization at, and where do you see the um, the dairy-free and plant-based movement among athletes going in terms of
Yeah.
first athletic performance, and then we'll talk about environment and climate on the other side.
Yeah, we will for sure. Yeah, well, Switch is definitely expanded over the years as we started as an athlete organization. And those will always be our roots. But we realized we wanted to make change on a broad scale in a variety of different ways. So we basically focus in 3 areas: um, legislative transformation at the federal level, and corporate policy shifts. Like we're the ones that got Starbucks to drop their plant milk upcharge to help to normalize plant foods and plant drinks in the space, and then human behavior change, of course. So those are kind of our triad right now, and what we're working on and what we're pushing forward. And the world is 17% dairy free. So, and the plant-based milk market, as most people know, is enormous. It's in about 20% of U.S. households are drinking plant-based milk instead of dairy, and 50% of American households stock plant-based milk, even if they have some dairy in the house. So it's the dairy-free thing is moving along at a much faster rate than the fully plant-based. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that. But one of them is certainly what we've talked about here today is people feel like shit when they drink dairy. And I can't tell you, I've had thousands of conversations with people that just like, I thought we needed it. I thought there was no other way. And so I just had to feel this way. But there's so many people that feel like they have a new lease on life when they ditch it and they get it out of their system. So we are moving at a pretty fast rate in
Well,
the dairy-free space.
yes, and I since I saw the Game Changers movie, and then since we spoke, um, we first spoke, it was in 2020, end of 2020,
Yeah.
2021. And in our conversation since, we've talked about and we've talked about here athletic performance at the elite level and how reducing or eliminating dairy and reducing or eliminating meat products can actually be a boost to uh, athletic performance. How have you woven in the environmental costs of the dairy and meat industrial complex and the benefits of uh, reducing that cost into your messaging?
Yeah, well, just with the science and the facts, and allowing people to be privy to the state that we're in. Ditching dairy alone, and not going fully plant-based, but just ditching dairy reduces carbon emissions by 45%, land use by 55%, water use by almost 100%. I think when you think of the bovine species, when you think of a cow, and this is issues obviously with beef cows and dairy cows, but just as an example, a dairy farm with just 2,500 cows, which is a small one because the big conglomerates are 10,000 cows, the Dean Foods, the Nestle, they have many more cows. I think, side note, a lot of times people will say, what about the small dairy farmer, like we're putting them out of business or something? And we're certainly not putting them out of business. The big huge food conglomerates are putting the small dairy farmer out of business. But a dairy farm with just 2,500 cows produces 110 million pounds of waste per year, which is equivalent to the waste from a city about the size of Sacramento, California. And
Wow.
the waste from dairy farms and beef farms they're stored in massive lagoons that are prone to leakage, which is a huge issue, as I think everyone on this call knows, contaminating the soil and our groundwater.
And then there's
So,
the issue of methane, uh,
absolutely,
uh, uh,
methane gas.
methane gas from cow farts, etc. And so,
Mm-hmm.
the dairy
It's
industry.
just,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think we think of the word efficiency all the time as athletes, right? Like, how can I be most efficient in my day, in my training, in my eating, right? Because do if you can be more efficient, you can do it faster and better, and then you'll be stronger and more resilient and able to produce more. And in the world of eating plants versus animals, it's that same concept, is efficiency. Animal production is so inefficient. It takes, this just staggers me and did from day one, a thousand gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of cow's milk. I mean, that's just the most inefficient system I can possibly think of. And that's all the embedded water, right? That it
Right.
takes to wash the, yeah. So I, I think especially athletes get that efficiency connection.
Well, what you're saying reminds me of something another of our Eco Athletes champions who could not be on the call today, Gary Gilliam, who played
Mm.
7 years in the NFL as a 300 plus pound offensive lineman who was plant-based. And he says, well, people ask me, where do you get your protein? And he goes, I get my protein from where your protein gets its protein, and
Yeah.
cutting out the middleman, so to
Yeah.
speak. And
Right.
the way Gary says it is much better than the way I do. Um, but in any case, I have other questions to ask, but I imagine you all have questions to ask. And so you can raise your hand physically, like Patches is. You can do a hand raise. I think there's a raise hand function on the thing, and I'll acknowledge that. But let's go with Patches to start.
Thank
And
you. I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for this answer. Can you please talk protein? How much do we need? Where are the best plant places to get it? And maybe
Yeah.
even go so far as like a day in the life of, what you might eat in a day or what you would
Yes. That's
suggest
such a,
eating in a day.
yeah. I know it's such a hot topic. We're definitely we've been bamboozled and over proteined by the meat and dairy industry feeding this. When I was training at my hardest and really trying to gain strength and bulk up, um, I was needing about 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And what I see on the internet is people have changed that to pounds, which is an unbelievable, unreal amount of
Oh,
protein when you
wow.
do that. And that's just the dietary guidelines of Americans recommended. They recommend zero point 0.8 to 1 per gram per kilogram of body weight. And so as an athlete, right, I was having to get in quite a bit more. But I was 135, 140 pounds at the time, right? So this was like, you know, 80, 90 grams of protein, depending on the day and depending on my output. So first of all, people are very over proteined, which leads to disease.
So let me just put
Um,
a pin in that for a
so
second. So
yeah,
at 135 pounds, Olympic athlete, you were targeting 80 to 90 grams of protein per day.
yeah,
That's way under what a lot of people have in their heads.
yeah, yeah. I know. And it really is crazy how it's been perpetuated into pounds. It's like, I mean, I don't even know if you'd have time to do anything else if you were trying to get 250 grams of protein or something, which I see people trying to do. I'm like, do you have time to even do life? Like, you're just like, let me just get more protein in. So, but in the plant world, there's just a plethora of high protein plant foods that the animals are eating, and then we're eating them. Like, right, as Lou talked about, that just take out the middleman. Tempeh is my favorite. Patches, we were talking about that before we came on, right? We have a delicious recipe with barbecue tempeh. Tempeh has 20 grams per cup. Lentils has 18 grams of protein per cup. Edamame, 19 grams per cup. Hemp seeds, which I put on every salad that I make, 10 grams for just 3 tablespoons. Tofu, 26 grams for 3/4 of a cup, actually. It's really high. And the list is endless. Soy milk, pea milk, quinoa, black beans, all the beans, peanut butter, almond butter. I mean, it just doesn't stop.
Seitan.
Um, Definitely. Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
well,
Do you mind if I just jump in here real quick in relation to the protein aspect? I don't want to step on any toes, Dotsie, by any means.
Oh,
this
yeah,
is
no, how
Keely
about? I could
and
use all the
Keely,
help.
and then Jackie, you're next.
Again, sorry for just jumping in. Plant-based protein, and protein recommendations, that's kind of my jam. So yeah,
Yay.
the Canadian recommendations are zero point 0.8 grams per kilo of protein. Now,
Mhm.
depending on the population, we would argue that is probably low, particularly for athletes and older populations. That said, when we look at recommendations for athletes, we're looking at about 1.6 grams per kilo is kind of the magic number that we see as optimal for almost every type of athlete, whether you're talking endurance, strength, power, what have you. There may be times when getting up to that 1.8, like if you are trying to lose weight, getting up to 1.8 might be beneficial for trying to maintain muscle mass as much as you can. But like even at the highest, the recommendations will be about 2 grams per kilo, which is still significantly less than what a lot of people are aiming for, right?
Yeah.
So like there is a little bit of research suggesting that 2.0 to 2.2 it might be beneficial, but from 1.6 to 2.2, it's really a point of diminishing returns. It really is that 1.6 that is kind of our magic number. So when you start looking at that for the body type of most athletes, and it sounds like a lot of the athletes on this call are endurance athletes. So we're not talking your 300-pound O lineman. It is
Yeah.
quite a bit less than
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are aiming for,
Mhm.
think they should
It
be aiming
is.
for.
And if you're in a growth state, which is what I was in coming from racing 10 years on the road as mostly endurance into track cycling, where I had to grow muscle quite literally to get off the line because we have one gear and no brakes, right? So you have to start in a gigantic gear so that when you get up to 60K an hour, you've got the gear. And even in that growth state, I was at 1.8, like I said. I wasn't even at 2. And I grew muscle tissue to where if you guys saw the game changers, you probably saw this scene where I was lifting on the inverted leg sled about 350 pounds times 5 sets times 30 reps a set. And right before Olympics, when I started tapering, I was up to 585 pounds
Oh,
times 6 sets at 60 reps each. And that was totally on plants. And I get all the time, and I'm not sure why. I guess people just want to kind of fight. Um, well, you don't know if you could have done that on animal protein. Correct. We'll never know. But the point is, it was on plant protein and all the other micro and macronutrients that I was getting in. But
I
yeah,
mean,
I was definitely able to grow strength and muscle mass at 1.6 to
and
your point and 1.8.
Chris Paul, who will be a first ballot NBA Hall of Famer, I mean basketball Hall of Famer,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just one Hall of Fame for all of basketball. Um, he is plant-based. He's now what, 39 and still playing
Yeah.
not at his peak level, but at a darn good level. Um, and you know, no one's saying, "Oh well, Chris Paul, what would you would have been this much better had you stayed on meat and dairy." They're just saying, "Whoa, well, how you just made that pass to Victor Wembanyama? That's pretty impressive."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, they're saying the former too
yeah,
to him definitely,
yeah,
but yeah, but he knows better and look at his performance. I mean, you can't argue to
yeah.
your point. Yeah.
And before I hand it to Jackie, we have one other question in the chat. Um, and this is from Oliver. Is there a place online that has all of the stats and figures that you have listed, i.e., the 1,000 gallons of water per 1 gallon of milk? Um, uh, it would be good
Yes.
to have for
Yeah.
advocacy or somewhere you can either send it to me and I can send it to everybody or,
It's super easy. Just go to Switch for Good and Why Ditch Dairy, and then you have 4 different reasons. Planetary responsibility. You'll click on it. You'll see all those, and everything's referenced. So if you want to dig into the study on where we pulled it from, you can.
okay, cool. See, that's easy. I don't have to do anything. Just go
Easy.
to Switch for Good.
Yeah.
I actually have one thing to do, and that's to hand it over to Jackie Pieri, who plays ice hockey. So that's a sprinting sport and an endurance sport.
Yeah, not as crazy as Dotsie sport though. That was cool to hear about your training and how you get off the line and stuff like that. I have
Oh, that's
two
not true.
questions. The first one is kind of just a practical one, maybe for I don't think I've ever had so many like plant-based athletes in one space, but so I've gotten pretty good at like planning my meals. We go on road trips for hockey. It's usually like 2 days. Gotten pretty good at
Yeah.
like prepping meals for that. With the national team, however, we're going to hotels for like 6, 7 nights. And so far, my strategy has just been to bring like pre-marinated tofu and tempeh. The hotels don't really
Right.
know what to do with it. Not really get like usually I'm mixing in a lot of beans. Like I try to simplify the protein thing. At my weight, I'm looking for like 90 grams a day. So I'm just like trying
Okay.
to get 30 per meal. It's pretty like simple math for me and get into a habit with my portion size so I don't have to think about it too much.
Hmm.
Um, but like on these 1 weeks away, I'm bringing like a cooler with so much food. I feel a bit ridiculous, and like the hotel doesn't really know what to do with it. And if anybody has any tips,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have some tips. I'm finding it's like teachable moments all over the place because it's so true that I live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico in the winter, and they have tofu at a lot of the restaurants, right? They're really it's a fairly international vibe here because people are coming for vacation and stuff, and so they're wanting to always to offer like vegan options or whatever. But since I live here, I've had the opportunity to uh, help them with their tofu because they always just make a really delicious dish and then put raw tofu on top, like not even heated. They just cut up the block. A lot of times they use extra soft instead of extra firm, right? We know it is a lot more protein, the extra firm, because there's not as much water. So I mean, it's for you, but it's for everyone after you to maybe go back in the kitchen, and I've taught them how to sear it and how to bake it and how to air fry it. Like you don't put raw chicken on top of it's disgusting. It's I'm sure people get the dishes and they're like, this is not delicious. And so I think yes, you're gonna have to pack it. But I think as we move in time here, you're going to help so many athletes after you, right? When they understand it, they could. But I think it's going to be you going back in the kitchen and saying, okay, here's what to do with this. I mean, you've delivered it to them, right? Because you're packing it with you because you can't expect them to have it. I mean, more and more places do, but certainly not everywhere. But I think it's an opportunity.
All right. Any
I did
or
have a second
Jackie,
question.
did you want to offer a follow-up question?
Yeah, just quickly, your story about big dairy, like taking your ad off the air is crazy to me. I was just wondering if anybody had any thoughts. Like I'm working towards playing with the Italian national team, and there are some sponsors that are dairy based. They're sponsored by Parmigiano Reggiano cheese.
Right.
Like we're kind of required to wear it on our team gear. I don't know if anybody has any like thoughts on that and how to handle that, or just I don't know if like it's really my place to speak out while I'm part of the team, but definitely after I'm off the team, it could be something I bring up or yeah, just generally how
Um,
to handle it.
I I mean, this is just me editorializing, so not speak. uh, Just my gut tells me that. I mean, if Reggiano is a sponsor, you have to wear it, I would think. However, um, I I think that after the games, assuming you guys get, oh yes, you're the host nation. So after 2026 Olympics, um, I think you could advocate using your public persona to do it. And I think are there plant-based cheese options, alternatives that are sold in Italy that could possibly become sponsors as well? But that's if
And
you want, that's a whole different effort that you have to want to undertake. You want to
yeah,
like say, hey, we should sell this sponsorship. And then they might say, okay, yeah, you go ahead and sell it.
yeah. I think too, Lou, like I always think of myself and Switch as just a cog in the wheel, which is obviously cycling term. But um, the more we speak up and the more we tell the truth, the more we change what's going to happen in the future. So I do think you can speak up to your team and say the reasons that you don't believe in this sponsor. But yes, you're going to have to wear it. I mean, in my years, the dairy industry was the title sponsor of the U.S. Olympic team for 10 years. And it was just towards the end that I was like, wait a minute, um, but now because we've spoken up, they are no longer the title sponsor of the U.S. Olympic team because the U.S. Olympic team said, no, thank you. They did not advertise on NBC the Paris Olympic Games, which is the first time in like 18 years. And they are not showing up at the big six marathons with their huge boosts like they always have. They are retracting from sponsoring athletic events in the US to some degree because we've been speaking up. And I don't mean we, me, and Switch for Good. Lots and lots of humans, lots of athletes have been speaking up all the way through this adventure with dairy, and they realize that athletes are not buying their lie anymore. So they've stopped selling it to us as much as they used to. They're now turning to their last stronghold, in my opinion, which is fear mongering parents and pediatricians and children. But anyway, to the point is, I do think you can speak up while also, saying, you're not going to do a protest. You're going to wear the uniform and you understand why that is. But every cog, every single statement we speak about, every time we stand up for the environment or ourselves or the animals or whatever it might be, for food justice, food equity, it matters. And I think you can change things for the future if you speak up now.
And then piggybacking off of that, Jackie, and we can have a talk offline on this, but depending on your appetite for, advocating for what you're for, putting Parmigiano Reggiano sponsorship on the side, like what your truth is and what you're for, we can help as eco athletes get you to speak to media, which will amplify your message to the extent that you're comfortable doing it. And here's an example that Margot, who's on this call, is familiar with, just to give you an idea of the nuance that's involved, right? In 2024 Paris, Lululemon is the Canadian Olympic outfitter, right? They're based in Vancouver. They often have, since their beginning and their kind of yoga roots, and they've talked about how green they are, and they do have a sustainability program. But if you dig, and you don't have to dig that deep into their numbers, so to say, they're talking the talk, but they ain't walking the walk. And so, we have, not only on this call, we have several Canadian eco athletes champions. We have a handful of Canadians who were Olympians in the Paris Games who are eco athletes champions, and they could not, as Lululemon wearers, talk about, oh, well, Lululemon, blah 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 blah. However, Margot, who's on this call, who was the first in the first Olympics that had beach volleyball as a sport back in 1996, Atlanta, Canadian, wrote an op-ed that appeared in the National Observer of Canada, which is like the USA Today of Canada, that said, "Oh," and Margot, I'm paraphrasing for you, that Lululemon, you've done great things on sustainability here, here, and here, but here, here, and here, no, you got to do better. We got to go faster, higher, stronger. And so, depending on where you are in your career cycle and what you're comfortable with, you can speak up. Margot, want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, just positionally, because I'm not a competitive athlete, I have less to risk by putting my voice out there. And I think that's one of the concerns sometimes athletes have while they're still on the platform, and so you can use your voice differently through the whole journey, I guess would be the big takeaway for me.
Awesome. And just in the chat, by the way, Keely put in a link about strategies to get nutrients that you might think that are hard to get on a plant-based diet. So there's a link there. So go check that out. Any other questions? Because I have a question, but
Well,
no.
I would love to bring a good conversation going on in the chat about soy production, maybe into this arena. Margot, you want to ask your question for everyone?
I will, with the caveat that it's from a relatively uninformed point of view.
But that's great because it's good for all of us to learn.
It's, there's sort of conversations online about the emission contribution, the CO2 contribution, and the deforestation based around soy product development, the resources that are engaged in that, and the deforestation in some of the places where soy products are produced. It doesn't seem clear one way or the other, but I'd love to have more input because I just I don't know.
It's huge, and it's a huge problem. And 97% of our soy is fed to animals that we eat. So if we just made soy for humans,
We'd be all right.
Those numbers wouldn't be anywhere close to that high.
Jackie, do you want to add to that?
No, I think Dotsie's stats are probably more up to date. I think I got mine from Instagram. I put 77 in the chat today, but it was just something I saw on Instagram today or yesterday from the Common Earth account, which often promotes plant-based diets from the environmental perspective. But yeah, my understanding as well is the deforestation and a lot of the negative impacts of the soy industry are from livestock feed. So.
Right. It gets back to that same efficiency argument, right? Like instead of feeding the soy to the animals to eat the animals, if we were feeding the soy to ourselves, we would need significantly less soy, right? Is that where it ends up?
And is that similar kind of like within the plant-based space, right? For example, in plant-based milk, there's oat milk and there's almond milk. But from what I've read, that almonds, just the process of growing almonds is so water intensive. Does that make oat milk from the environmental perspective the better option than almond milk? I haven't read much about that distinction, but I just thought I would bring it up. Have you gotten, I shouldn't ask it that way. I'm sure you've gotten like skepticism from athletes who, have been fed a lifetime of you got to have your milk and you got to have your beef and da, 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 da. And how do you deal with that? And has that amount of skepticism changed over time in your observation?
Yeah, I think it's kind of gone back and forth. I think in the beginning it was just there was a lot more intrigue and interest and questions, and then now with meat and dairy spending many millions of dollars with the Rick Berman behind the whole spinning of this ultra processed food myth, which they did on purpose, and it's working to some degree. I see just more confusion than anything, right? People just don't know what to believe. They don't know the real science. And it's just, it's like well, now we're not fact checking at all, anything. So it's just the wild, wild west now. I feel like in the beginning, social media, there was a bit more of I felt like I had a bit more trust in, there would be references and but anyway, so I think it's ebbed and flowed as far as it goes. And the confusion seems to be at another high right now, but I think it'll continue to ebb and flow until I don't know, the planet implodes and we all have to take action. I'm not sure what but we'll get everyone there.
There's a lot to unpack in that one right there.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat from Sasha, our Vancouver-based tennis player, who asks, do you have any advice on specific plant-based milks? She writes, I've heard that oat milk isn't very good for you. And just as I mentioned, almond milk, on the other hand, is so water intensive. What plant-based milk is the best?
Yeah, well,
There's been some really cool new milks coming in that are fortified with pea protein. And peas are actually a super interesting source of protein because they fix nitrogen in the soil, which means you need less fertilization. So you can now get oat milk that's high protein, that has the equivalent amount of protein, 8 to 9 grams per cup of cow's milk. And pea protein, again, tends to be quite sustainable. Maybe I'm biased because my entire PhD thesis was around pea protein. But
oh wow.
Cool. But yeah, so if you Ripple milk, as is in the chat, is really good. It's really tasty. It does tend to be expensive though. But I mean, I think that what needs to happen is if more people are choosing pea-based beverages, there's going to be more competition on the market. More companies are going to see the demand, and then that price is going to come down.
Here's the
Is it,
one that I have that is just what you're talking about, Keely. So in the US, Silk makes one. It's 8 times more protein. It's almond milk fortified with pea protein. So if you want to look for something like that.
and I wonder if they have
Yeah,
an
we have a
oat,
similar silk almond cashew blend with protein.
Yep.
Soy milk also super high protein. But again, if you're worried about the source of that soy, and I really do think it's about where is that soy coming from, right? There are places that where it might be that you might harvest soy where you're at greater risk for deforestation than others.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna look at. I love the Ripple, the name Ripple, like because of the ripples of change. Or and then of
Mm.
course, if you're a Grateful Dead head, there's the song Ripple, but that just dates me. So, um, I'll move on. Um,
I just
uh,
wanted to add, in case anybody on the US have seen that milk, and it's sold typically on Ralph's and sometimes in Smart and Final, which I know it's a little more of a budget supermarket. So in case anybody wants to try that brand, I've seen it there. I
which
would
brand?
encourage to try. I just haven't bought it yet.
Which brand?
Ripple?
Oh, okay. You see it in the U.S. is what you're saying.
Yep.
And and then, um, are my question is about plant-based yogurt, which is not too far from milk. Are there brands, Dotsie, that you recommend in terms of and types, cashew versus others that you think are the best?
I think we should lean into our resident dietitian on here. I am the only athlete on planet Earth that hates yogurt. So there's a lot out there, but I haven't been to the yogurt section recently.
I do want to say I'm not technically a dietitian. You can call me a nutritionist,
I
but
think
I'm
you,
not a
I think you,
dietitian.
okay.
But
You know a
dietitian is
lot.
a protected term in Canada, so I can't actually call myself a dietitian.
Okay, got
But I
it.
mean, there's so many different options out there, and if we're being perfectly honest, we don't think of things like oats as having high protein, but oats actually have quite a bit of protein in them. So get the if you like plant-based yogurt, get the one that you like. Like
I
at the
love
end of the day, the
I
most
like
important
that.
thing as an athlete is energy.
I threw into the chat Siggy's. Siggy's plant-based yogurt is
Okay.
tasty. It's low in sugar and it has 10 grams of protein. So it's a better macro profile. It's not quite up there with Greek yogurt, but it's better than like old school Dannon used to be.
For sure.
And it's
That's
good.
awesome. I didn't know Siggy's had a plant-based protein or a plant-based yogurt, sorry.
Yep, I've seen it. Any other questions? Because we're a little bit over our time, and I really appreciate everybody's input, and especially Dotsie's everything.
Yeah. Hey Lou, what I want to gift everyone is I mean, we talked about the environment, but maybe not as much as I think some might have wanted to. We have been working with LA 28, well, for 5 years now, looking at serving 80, 90, 95% plant-based to the spectators at the Olympics. And in that journey, we created for them food environmental impact estimates. And it's kind of cool how we did it because we related if they went 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100 base plant-based for the spectators, how many how much land they would save, and we measured it in soccer fields, which is kind of fun, and how much fresh water they would save, and we measured that in Olympic-sized swimming pools, and it's all on a graphic. So Lou, I'll send it to you. Will you send it out to all the eco athletes, because it's very nerdy, lots of data, lots of stats. I think a lot of people on this call will like it.
I mean, we are a nerdy group, also especially good athletes,
Good.
except for myself. And yes, we'll send that. And then isn't there an ebook that the attendees here will be able to get?
Yes, definitely. So a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago, we saw the need for just a guidebook for plant-based athletes written by MDs and dietitians and PhDs. And because we were just getting a lot more questions from athletes, like, is there a resource that I could really sink my teeth into? And I thought, gosh, yeah, it doesn't seem like there is anything. So I called the IOC because I thought, yeah, maybe there is something, and I just don't know about it. And they, to their credit, said, we don't have anything because, as y'all know, they have a lot of guidebooks on how and what animals to eat. They said, we don't have one, but we need one because we're getting questions. So we wrote this book alongside the IOC. It took us about 1.5 years to write, and you all will be receiving a digital version of that for free.
Thank you
It's
so
called
much.
Let the Plant-Based Games Begin. So
Woohoo.
I'll send that to you too, I guess, and then you'll just send these out to in one email together. Okay, sounds
Yes.
good.
And then Dotsie, we got to talk offline about kind of, kind of pooling our resources on the Olympics because I think for LA, because I think we can do mega stuff.
Yes, I was talking about you and this very subject with Jen yesterday. Yes, sir. We got a lot of
Awesome.
work to do.
We got a lot
Make
of
it
work to
happen.
do. Well,
Yeah.
listen, unless there are any other questions, I last chance for questions for Dotsie. Hey, Doug, wait a minute. We have to say hello before we say goodbye
I've been
to,
here
Oh,
the whole time, Lou.
I know, but I didn't.
Oats, plant
There's
protein, pea
Doug Lynch.
protein. I'm in.
I think Dotsie, I don't know if you guys know each other. Uh, Doug is an Eco
mm-mm.
Athletes champion and an
Yay.
ecopreneur just like yourself. Um, and
Nice.
so I, I'll let Doug played professional hockey in the NHL and in Europe and serial entrepreneur. Doug, tell everybody about uh, Philium and Zenkai Sports and maybe in a quick elevator pitch.
Yes, I'm gonna keep this super brief. Yeah, thanks. Good to see everybody. Margot, Jackie, good to see you guys. Dotsie was very interesting today. All the conversations. I've been a pescatarian. I was vegan for a year after I retired from playing hockey, and then I went pescatarian for the last 8 years. So very, very familiar with a lot of this stuff, but great notes today. Yeah, I started an eco-friendly apparel company 7 years ago that got acquired, and now I'm running a material science company. So we're trying to bring more
Ah,
environmentally
cool.
friendly natural materials into the sports and sports world.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what we're up to.
Yeah, and I wonder if there is a cross promotion there,
Yeah.
because and that's a separate conversation. And Doug is this, and Dotsie are this great combination of idea person and turning ideas into action. Um, and that's the intersection we want to be in. Um, so,
Very
uh,
cool.
thank you so much, Dotsie, and thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle, and all the Switch for Gooders who showed up, both for showing up and also for what you're doing. Um, and also thank you to our Eco Athletes champions for your contributions as well. Dotsie, any last words?
No, thanks for being with us and just for learning alongside us. And I think when Doug said at the end, he said, that's what we're up to. I thought he said disruption. And I was like, that's what, all of us are
Let's do
here
all of it.
doing, right? Like, yeah, let's disrupt the status quo. So I'm
Amen.
proud to be on the call with all of you.
Amen. That's what we're trying to do at Eco Athletes with what we call the climate comeback. And
Yeah.
that this session, I think, advanced it in important ways. So thank you,
Yeah.
Dotsie, and we will make the recording available also for the Eco Athletes champions who are on the call. We have two community chats next week. Usually there's like 2 or 3 months in between chats, but with the tragic LA wildfires, several champions got in touch with me and said, we need to do something. And so the first something is going to be our two chats next week, one at Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and one Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, this very time slot. It's going to be given by Eco Athletes champion Anna Klenke, who was a rower at Clemson University and then recently graduated, and now she works for the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forestry Division, and she is involved. And part of her job is wildfire remediation in Wyoming. Now she doesn't have personal experience with Los Angeles, but she can talk about wildfires from a first person point of view. And we think these are going to be very uh, compelling chats. And then also, you will be getting more information about the upcoming Collegiate Cup, which is going to be very exciting for Eco Athletes champions, even if you have nothing to do with college sports in the United States. So,
I'm not sure
Patches, you
that
wanted to add one more thing?
I would just like to point out about what you're discussing with the fires. If there are any Switch for Good athletes that would be interested in attending, I don't know if we would be able to open it up beyond our Eco Athletes ecosystem, but if you're interested, maybe send an email to Lou, um, and we'll see if that's something that we could.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm very interested. I work for a CGI, which is a 95,000 employee corporation, 44 countries, and on a quarterly basis, I always get to speak to approximately 100 people about climate initiatives. I'll be speaking early February, and I really wanted to try and focus more on the climate impact of the wildfires, because I know this is near and dear to everybody's heart. So any information on that certainly gives me some I was going to say meat around bones, but I really don't want to use terminology. It really gives me some core information to speak to.
Okay, so you see Lou's email is in there. So if you're interested to see if we might be able to include some, beyond Eco Athletes, I'm not sure that we can, but if you can express your interest, we'll see what
Sure.
we can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, and any of the other Switch for Good folks, if you're interested in joining one of those chats, just you see my email in the in our chat here. We'll hook you up.
Yeah. I put my email into just in case we didn't cover something that somebody really wanted to discuss. Reach out anytime.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. And this
thanks.
is a great session. We will get you also your ebook once we get the information from Dotsie. All right. And so now, wherever you are in the world, have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see some of you next week at our community chats.
Bye, all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop the recording.